Drive west from Charlotte, North Carolina on Interstate 85, and you'll cross the Catawba River. Wide and placid, it's a big draw for recreational boaters and sportsmen. In close but separate locations on the river's wooded banks, two people arrive here on the morning of May 5th, 2008. They could not be more different. One is a 20-year-old student from nearby UNC Charlotte, Ira Yarmolenko, a musician, a photographer, a poet.
We as women, as children.
An outdoorsy type who loves nature.
Ooh. She really enjoyed the beauty of nature. She tried to find it everywhere.
Pavel is Ira's brother. Why do you think your sister drove to the river that day?
I think that she was looking for a pretty spot to take pictures at.
Ira is originally from the Ukraine, immigrating here with her family when she was just 7 years old. The other person on the river that day, 39-year-old Mark Carver. He's from just down the road in nearby Gastonia, a dirt road which bears his family name, lined with modest dwellings which house his relatives.
Carver was a very simple person. His family lived out in the country, didn't have much education, could not read very well, cannot write very well.
Unlike Ira, Mark has never been to college. In fact, he's never gone to high school. After years of working in the local cotton mills, he now spends his day here at this fishing hole on the Catawba, where he casts away his troubles, often with this man, his cousin, Neil Cassida. Robin Carver is Mark's sister-in-law.
Oh, they were together all the time when they were fishing and stuff.
What happened on that river that bright May day is as perplexing as it was violent. But this much we can tell you for sure. Today, Ira Yarmolenko is in a North Carolina cemetery, and Mark Carver is in this North Carolina prison, serving a life sentence for her murder. I recently went behind the barbed wire and concrete walls to hear his story. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
I'm Elizabeth. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Why don't you have a seat? Okay. How long have you been in this prison, Mom?
5 years.
There is no question that what happened to Ira that day was terrible and tragic. But attorney Chris Muma, who's devoted her career to exonerating the wrongfully convicted, says Carver is also a victim.
We think Mark is innocent. And if Mark is innocent, the family has not received justice, and the true perpetrator is still out on the streets. Sitting on the back.
Muma took me out on the river to the spot where Carver and Cassida were fishing that morning. Mark would back his truck up to down this road?
Down here.
So he didn't walk the road, he drove down.
He drove down.
And literally parked with the back of the truck right here.
He would sit on the back, the tailgate, and fish.
Cassida left around 12:30 that afternoon, leaving Carver alone. Half an hour later, two jet skiers out for a ride on the Catawba come upon a gruesome scene.
Yes, County 911.
I'm a boater on the Catawba River, above the I-85 bridge.
Something blue and metallic catches the eye of one of the jet skiers.
There's a car that's run off an embankment, and there's a body laying there. I don't know if they're alive or not.
And as they motor up closer, they see the body of a young girl lying in the grass beside the car.
It is Ira Yarmolenko, her body, her car, found 100 yards upriver from Carver's fishing hole.
The police found Ira's body right beside the driver's side of the car.
Elizabeth Leland has written extensively about the case for the Charlotte Observer. She says the bizarre crime scene posed far more questions than answers.
She wasn't raped. She wasn't robbed. There were lots of things that just didn't make sense about this case.
Among them, the odd manner of death. These 3 ligatures around her neck.
There was the drawstring that had been taken out of her hoodie and wrapped around tight and knotted in several places. There was a bungee cord that had been tied around. And lastly, a very dainty little blue ribbon.
A disturbing discovery in the Catawba River, a body.
As the media descends, police begin canvassing the area for witnesses. They talk to those 2 jet skiers and to construction workers who were in the area where Ira's body was found.
We went to see if anything could be done, but it was too late. There was no movement.
And of course, they find that fisherman calmly casting for carp just downstream, Mark Carver.
And what did they tell you was happening?
They didn't tell me nothing. They just said they need to get my name and address and my fishing license. I give them to them, and then he gave them back. I shook his hand. They went up through there.
Carver is cooperative, but not very helpful. He says he neither saw nor heard anything. So police have nothing but bad news to deliver when they notify Ira's family.
Police officer came to the door.
What did he say?
He slowly walked in and told us that unfortunately they have found my sister's body and that they're very certain that it's her.
I can't fathom getting news like that.
I think all of us simply collapsed where we were, and that was it.
Days pass with no arrest. The mystery now as deep as the sorrow.
I hope that when you go home tonight, you will tell everybody that you love them. You will tell everyone that you know that you love them.
Pavel eulogizes his sister at a memorial service on campus. In the coming days, she is laid to rest, while detectives speak to those who last saw her, piecing together her final steps.
This video is to represent the timeline for Miss Ira Yarmolenko.
Detectives record this timeline video.
Ira spent the morning running errands. She went to the credit union, then she went to the Goodwill.
A security camera catches her donating several bags of clothing.
And then she went to Jackson's Java, which was a coffee shop where she worked.
It takes approximately 5 minutes and 50 seconds to drive to Jackson's Java from Goodwill.
And from there to the Catawba River is about a 19-minute drive.
This is the last documented moment of Ira's life, a grainy video of her car driving through the parking lot of a YMCA, about half a mile from the embankment where her car was found. Police study it, searching for any sign of another person with her. But the video is so unclear, police can't tell. So they pursue the theory that Ira must have met her killer out on the river.
If someone approached her that she didn't know, would she have had her defenses up?
Unfortunately for her, I think she was much more of an outgoing type of person.
The kind of person who would trust people she didn't know.
I think so, yeah.
With the search for the killer dragging on for weeks and then months, public pressure on the police to solve the crime mounts.
We were tormented by this search. We thought of it more or less constant.
I'll need you to put on these gloves before going through the evidence.
On the ground floor of the Gaston County Courthouse, we find this cardboard box. Inside, the evidence from the Ira Yarmolenko crime scene, the 3 ligatures that were wrapped around her neck, a small floral bag from which one of those ligatures, a blue ribbon, had been torn.
Look at how tight that knot is.
Crime scene photos of her car on the banks of the river, all pieces of a Rubik's Cube of a case. Investigators spend 6 months working every possible lead and interviewing cooperative witnesses like Mark Carver repeatedly.
Did you see that little girl?
I told him I didn't know what happened to the girl, or I went up there and helped her.
Carver and his cousin Neil Cassida both volunteered DNA samples. Meanwhile, Ira's family works the media, keeping images of the smiling student, the carefree spirit that was Ira, alive in the public's mind.
We simply did the only thing we could do, contact local media and get information out there so that possible witnesses would submit information.
Pavel, a brother who won't quit, at one point appeals directly to the killer.
I have no doubt that once you truly realize how deeply you've hurt us all, you'll have no choice but to surrender.
It is not until 7 months after the murder that investigators finally catch a break. They have a DNA match. Traces of Mark Carver's DNA in one spot on the outside of the car, above the rear driver's side door. Neil Cassidy's DNA is in 2 spots, on the inside of the right passenger window and on an armrest.
What kind of DNA are we talking about?
It's DNA where skin cells have been shed, and typically it's called touch DNA.
It is not blood DNA or semen, but police think it's enough, even though the 2 cousins had no obvious motive for murder.
The question that the DNA never answered and the police never could was why these men would kill Ira Yarmolenko.
Groping for answers, police come up with a theory that Ira had somehow seen Carver and Cassida doing something so outrageous they had to kill her to keep their secret.
Their theory was that Ira was down there to photograph and caught the men doing something that they didn't want anybody to know about. And so that the men violently strangled her and pushed the car down the embankment, and that's why their DNA was found on it.
So now Mark Carver finds himself on the hot seat.
Do you know what DNA is? I found your DNA inside her car. How can you explain it? I didn't find out. Oh, yeah, I did. Now, where's the deal plate?
My DNA ain't in that car.
How much money do you want?
I bet you $1 million. My DNA ain't in that car. I didn't know that car was even up there.
Hey, mine.
I can't help it, but I didn't do it.
You said you didn't see a car, you never heard a car, you never touched a car. Lo and behold, guess whose DNA is inside a dead girl's car?
Over and over again, you keep telling the police, we didn't touch the car.
I told them, but they didn't believe nothing we told them.
In fact, during that hour-long interrogation, Carver denies seeing Ira or touching her car more than 50 times.
I'm telling the truth.
When the interview finally wraps up, police allow Carver and his cousin Neil Cassida to go home. But Neil's daughter Amy says the writing was on the wall.
He walked in and he was like, they're trying to pin this on me.
Did he tell you what they said to him?
Well, they were saying that they knew he did it. He just needed to confess it.
2 days later, before sunrise, police show up to arrest the men. They haul them back in and give them one last chance to confess.
All right, Neil, we got a few procedural things to do real quick.
This is Neil Cassida.
Y'all barking the wrong tree. If I swear my mom was dirty, but I didn't have a thing to do with it.
No confession, no matter.
Police charged Mark Carver and Neil Cassida with her murder.
The two men are charged with first-degree murder, even though Neil Cassida had already passed a polygraph. The men appear stunned and confused at their arraignment the following day.
Like everybody was just in shock. We just couldn't believe it was happening.
We do not want to go to trial until we have all the evidence.
The man leading the charge against Carver and Cassida is Gaston County District Attorney Locke Bell. But it is a slow charge, even after the men make bail.
Neil Cassida's family greeted him inside the Gaston County Jail tonight.
No comment, please.
Police continue to test and eliminate 8 other suspects. 2 years pass before prosecutors bring the case to trial. Then, on the eve of the opening arguments in Neil Cassida's case, a shocking development.
It was Sunday morning. The trial started on Monday. He was in the kitchen, and he told my mom that I'm having a little trouble breathing, and he just fell over.
Neil Cassida never gets his day in court.
Neil Cassida died in his Mount Holly home Sunday morning.
Those 2 years was very hard on him. He was so worried that he was going to prison for something he didn't do.
Even with one of the defendants dead, the state pushes forward with the prosecution of the other, Mark Carver, who at the time hires local defense attorney Brent Ratchford. Before the trial, Carver is offered the deal of a lifetime, plead guilty to second-degree murder, and spend just 4 to 8 years in prison. Ratchford thought the deal was a strong statement about the state's weak case.
I'd never gotten such a low offer. He turned it down without batting an eye.
I'm not going to plead guilty for something I didn't do.
You'd rather spend the rest of your life in prison?
Yeah.
Mark Carver walked calmly into court.
In March 2011, Carver's legal reckoning finally arrives.
He's upbeat and feeling good. He's innocent, so we're ready for our day.
At trial, prosecutors build their case on 3 key pieces of evidence. The first, Carver's proximity to the crime scene. If he were less than 100 yards from where Ira was killed, prosecutors argue his claim that he heard nothing that day can't be true. Detectives testify about an experiment they conducted on the river. One detective stood where Carver was fishing, another where Ira was. According to testimony, they spoke in normal voices and could hear each other.
We had a lot of issue with that, but it was allowed to come in anyway.
The second piece of evidence is that touch DNA found on Ira's car that matched Mark Carver. Prosecutors say it proves he touched the car and therefore must have been at the crime scene. And to drive that point home, the state has an ace in the hole. A moment from that interrogation where Carver, police testify, gave himself away.
I believe the words he used was a little thing or a little...
Detective William Terry was also in the room during that interrogation.
He said that she came up to him about right here.
The gotcha moment was when the police detective was recounting the interrogation and said that Mark Carver knew that Ira was little.
That moment is crucial. Carver had always said he had never seen Ira, so prosecutors ask how could he know how tall she was unless he was lying.
The very first thing I thought of was, they got you.
Judge Timothy Kincaid presided over Carver's murder trial.
That's what did it for you?
That was the turning point of that trial for me.
And with that, the prosecution rested its case.
Everyone was then sort of on the edge of their chairs waiting for the defense to present a case.
But to the shock of Carver's family, Ratchford decides the state's case is so weak, he will present no witnesses or evidence for the defense.
They could not explain how the crime occurred. Based on that, the jury's not going to be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt.
They told us no way that they were going to be convicted.
They're wrong. It takes the jury just a few hours to return with a verdict, guilty of first-degree murder.
When I heard that verdict come down, I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh my God, they got it wrong.